All right. Good morning, everybody. Another fine Monday morning is upon us. Thanks for checking in. See what's shaking this morning. More winter weather for the most part, it looks like. At least somewhat. Out there for the folks back east. Michigan looks like it's just basically getting snow. It's all covered, at least by the weatherman. We're supposed to be having like 60-degree weather today. 50, something like that. It's supposed to be warm for the next couple days, and we might get some rain and snow on the Friday or on the weekend, something like that. But it's basically hot and sunny here. I don't even know if it's supposed to get below freezing in the morning. At night, craziness. Thought it was January. But maybe it's not. But yeah, a little bit of winter. Looks like the Midwest is getting their Midwest snow weather, as you would expect, right? Nothing unusual to report on that area. See here, we got Walter Davis checked in with us. Microwave breakfast sandwich. The microwave breakfast. Figure you'll have to eat worms and rodents and SHTF, so you're starting now. That's an interesting comparison. Just bring lots of butter and salt. You should be fine. Mule Team 66. Hey, what's up, Mule? How you doing this morning? Good to see you. Hope you're doing well, Mule. Looks like you're getting a little bit of snow and rain at this moment. So it's better to be inside sitting here doing this anyway, right? Chipper 66 catching the rain band in Northwest Arkansas. Yep, there it is. Catching you right there upside the head. That shouldn't be too bad, though, right? Just showers, nothing excessive. Why do we get the global warming, Walter? I wouldn't say it's global warming. It's just a passing through of fronts. It is kind of weird, and I guess in January it's probably 15 degrees too warm. So it's that climate change, you know. I'm sure it'll flip. I'm sure we'll be getting some winter, and you'll warm up here at some point. Let's see. You're putting in a complaint to HARP. They're slacking off this decade, right? Yeah, supposedly it's just a little catchphrase is climate change. They can't make up their mind. Who knows? But thanks for checking in, folks. But there's your weather snapshot. If you didn't look outside and already see it, you can see what's coming your way out there. And I guess most of the East Coast is going to be getting that rain band again. Looks like the rain just left. What was it? The Pro Bowl. I saw in the highlights of the Pro Bowl, like getting a downpour yesterday. That's Florida. Does it ever not rain in Florida? It's kind of like Hawaii. It's going to just wait a minute. It will rain. So there's our weather. And I got a bunch of tabs pulled up here, but I did want to check in on the stock market futures. Oh, down. That's kind of surprising, actually. Everything kind of was pointing to an upswing, but over the weekend, but it looks like it's down over 200. So flat, more of the same, more all do about nothing. But oil was down, down below 53 now. Oil will drop $1.20 already. That's just already today. Which is interesting with all the looking at the tea leaves, you see the war developing, but the price of oil doesn't get affected by it. It's interesting. Gold and silver are slightly down. Gold's below 1,300. Gold was 1,301 over the weekend, and the fix is in They fixed it down. Now it looks like it's slightly up. It's a trick. Same with silver. Silver was at 1579 over the weekend. After the fix. So when they put the fix in, they dropped them a little bit. That's what I was wondering if they would do. But they, I want to get that back down to 1525 or so. So the markets are preparing. Caterpillar, another industrial indicator. Things aren't getting built if you don't have a Caterpillar. Forecast short of expectations. You can't build forever. All right. So we'll check in on the economic stuff a little bit later, but we got, I was looking at the little Brexit to see what was going on out there. I didn't see much news about Brexit over the weekend, but a couple links came out of Drudge. See what was going on with the EU in particular. This is an article had an interesting take. It's lamenting the coming apart of Europe, or basically Europe returning to what it was. Europe was never like united. Maybe for like 10 years after World War II, I guess you could say, or something, like, or maybe after the Berlin Wall fell, it was slightly united for a little while. Europe has never been united, but here it says Europe coming apart before our eyes. It's basically the bankers lamenting the nationalism that is sweeping through the area. But it starts right off. Liberal values in Europe face a challenge not since the 1930s even. Leading intellectuals from 21 countries have said, those leading intellectuals. Yeah, we know who they are. It's all Trump's fault, Mule. Yep. That's probably why you're getting all that snow and rain, right? But as the UK lurches towards Brexit and nationalists look to make sweeping gains in EU parliamentary elections. I guess the shame is it takes a bunch of war to keep the Europeans united, because what did Europe look like before World War One? If it wasn't for entangling alliances, which never should have drug everybody into World War One, they were a bunch of self-serving monarchies. There was no liberal values in old Europe. But it goes on. But a group of 30 writers declared in a manifesto published in several newspapers that Europe was coming apart before our eyes. We must now will Europe or perish beneath the wave of populism. So they're not hiding it. They're going against the will of the people by trying to keep Europe in this cohesive, semi-cohesive group. I mean, it's totally, this whole thing is just like people that are trying to force something that should have never happened, and they're doing it against the will of the people and against the evidence of history that Europe has never been united, except by force, like the Roman Empire and the Germans and Napoleon and all these people that sought to conquer the whole area. People don't want to be conquered by people across the other side of the continent. And they're so much different, but they don't get that. The elite, these upper crust folks that have the liberal values, apparently. But I guess you could see if Europe does disintegrate, that war would be on the horizon. That would be the one negative, because no power vacuum goes unpunished. The misgotten deeds of the EU will make everybody pay for the pain in the long run. So I found that it's an interesting article of their take of The historical success of Europe. I just don't get it. What historically has been a European value? The French and the Prussians battled and fought forever, which it was interesting. Today is the day that the Prussians took over. This what kind of got me catching up on this. The Prussians entered Paris on this day in 1871. I guess you could consider that part of the beginning of the uniting of Europe. Maybe that's when it started. It's all about military force. The EU elections in May are the first that will not include Britain. The EU is what? Europe is. If they're going to call the EU Europe, that's what. In reality, if you go by governance, not just by economic union, barely 30 years old. I mean, the original EU was just economically tied with the euro. It probably isn't even 30 years old. It's time for the EU to die. Kill it. It should have been killed in its infancy, right? Before it spreads like a disease. But it laments all these what they consider far right nationalists in Italy, Hungary. Says here, unlike Eurosceptics in the UK, most European counterparts do not want to leave the EU, but to take it over. Well, yeah, everybody wants the power control, right? They don't want the Germans to be in charge. They're sick and tired of the Germans being in charge. It's like they fought a whole war to keep the Germans from ruling Europe, and look where they're at. The Germans are ruling Europe. Or at least they're dragging Europe down with them. The German economy pretty much drives the train. So I found that interesting. This link is in I think I got all the thing in the description box. If you just came in or you're fresh, you probably didn't see it, Walter, but they'll be down there if you refresh. But yeah, so I found that interesting. People are wailing and gnashing of teeth as the EU comes apart, and the dream of centralized, all-powerful government goes down the toilet drain. Pro-Europeans, which has never been anybody. Has there ever been any people in Europe that consider themselves European? When you talk to anybody, it'd be like going to even in the Confederacy, when it was the Confederacy, it was still, they were Georgians and Texans and Mississippians. You know, they were from states. They weren't Confederates necessarily. They consider themselves part of their individual state, just the same in the EU. They're not Europeans. They're Germans and Italians, and they wouldn't. I've never introduced anybody from one of those countries and been like, "Oh, I'm European." No, they're British or Danish or French or whatever. Especially the French. The French are very arrogant. They're never going to claim to be European. But those roustabouts and those, less than worthy people in Austria and everywhere else. Only the elite have that vision. The average person, I don't believe, does. They're probably be interested to see how the propaganda in their public schools works to push that agenda. Just kind of off the cuff remark there. But the sooner the better for everybody. Interestingly, on the same take, something to look out for in other countries as the economic situation deteriorates. Italy is handing out free money. Wes S. has joined the side chat. What's going on? What if Trump is making the European nations get ready for war? Right. There was just a article about France and Germany joining a compact to support militarized force in the EU, something like that. But beef up their own military so we don't have to do all the work. Well, I think Europe is going to be a conquered continent if it or it'll just sit it out. Which there was some. We have had some foreshadowing that Europe will sit out the next big war. Um, Depending on what level of conspiracy you want to get into. There's been several fictional accounts, books that have talked about Europe setting out the war. The Red Dawn, they said that Europe sets out the war. You know, is that really fortunate? I don't know, but the way things are working right now, EU is in no position to do anything but set it out. Because, like you said, Wes, we can't do it. It'd be much better for us to let them do their own thing. Walter Davis said it was like a second renaissance where Europe was about trade, then calm the nationalism, then the wars. The pattern has been repeating since Roman times. Right, one group get a little taste of power, but they always consider themselves one. I don't know. I guess you could call them ethnic groups. I mean, the Germans, the French, the Polish, the Brits. You know, size of the militaries of most NATO members are ridiculously small. Oh yeah, Wes, they don't. They definitely don't spend what we do. That's for sure. We we back their play in almost all cases. Trunkback Jim is with us. Good morning. Perry Wood, good morning. Good Monday morning. Walter says any war in Europe will end with the refugees winning. And you're talking about the refugees from Africa, right, Walter? Yeah, our biggest mistake was World War One was the hugest mistake by the U.S. An easy war to sit out of, but because of economic ties, especially the London Central Bank, got drug in. That's about all you can say about that. There was no moral reason to side with what we call the Allies now. There was no moral superiority to that war whatsoever for anybody. It was just a bunch of monarchs and centralized governments fighting over old disagreements, I guess you could say. Just like a bunch of high school kids fighting over stuff from elementary school still, especially the French and the Germans. And that drug nearly the whole world down with them, and we decided to jump into it. And that really screwed up a lot of stuff. Would have been a whole. I need to write an alternate history on the situation if the U.S. hadn't gotten World War One. But anyway, it definitely keeps the population down, though. Population control. Italy handing out free money. Okay, so let's see what the idea of citizens' income. So we've heard of universal basic income. The couple cities in California, I think, have tried it for like $500 a month. That's already, I think it was Fremont and somewhere else, something like that. But could, in theory, appeal to both left and right. The former because it might reduce inequality, the latter because it could simplify Social Security. Are you serious? Since when is Social Security a supposed right idea? Oh, it depends on if you consider the left and the right both left statist ideologies, then I guess it makes sense. 5-Star, which is this 5-Star movement, is rolling out a plan in Italy. Unfortunately, the plan has little of the revolutionary spirit of Milton Friedman's idea for a simple, guaranteed basic income for all citizens, jobless or not, and is more like a classic welfare to work program. Okay. After a deep recession, weak recovery, there's a strong case for helping Italy's left behind. Is that really what they're? I mean, I've never seen a welfare program that was really targeting the left behind. If you targeted left behind, it would just be for them, not for universal application, right? So, new citizens' income, I guess as they're calling it, is for households earning less than 9,360 euros. So this is only for targeted areas. It's made up of an income support scheme. A scheme is probably a good way to, and a housing allowance. That's definitely a pretty low standard. I mean, 10,000 less a year. That's pretty. That's definitely way way below the poverty level in America. I can imagine with the EU and how expensive things are there. That's got to be way below the poverty level. So it is aimed at pensioners and people of working age. The latter must be willing to accept a suitable job. So you have to work to earn it. So that's not universal basic income then. Uh, we know how much yelling and screaming we get here when we mention that you have to work for your welfare. It's like people's heads come unhinged. Accept a suitable job or lose the benefit. Thus the difference to more radical basic income schemes. So it's not basic income. If you're working for it, it's or going to work of some sort. Companies will get a discount on their Social Security contributions when they hire a citizen's income recipient. So they're calling it citizens' income, Italy's new citizens' income. So this is an idea. I don't think it's even got through the legislative cycle here. So this is Italy's floating out there. About 1/5 of Italy's citizens are at risk for poverty. Why? Because the central banks there are collapsing. They're considering this worse than 2008, when the figure of 18.9% were below poverty at that time. They're saying here the plan risks, this is a Bloomberg article, so you know what their angle is. Yet the new plan risks targeting the wrong people. Well, of course. The two most vulnerable groups in Italy are foreigners and families with lots of children, but they don't want to encourage children, so that's a good way to get reduce that problem. A household with at least one foreign-born member, well, of course, foreigners always get first head-of-line privileges, is almost twice as likely to be at risk of poverty or social exclusion than one where everyone was born in Italy. Similarly, families with 5 or more members are far greater risk. Okay, moving on. So they're feel-good comments to make people feel like they're helping somebody in need, when they're just going to create massive inflation and empty the coffers of the government and people's pocketbooks through taxes, and everything continues to fall apart and nothing gets better. How's this close out? So 5 stars, the agency here that's proposing this certainly deserves credit for trying to address poverty in Italy in a way other parties haven't done. But the urgent timetable and state of Italy's bureaucracy risks making it a waste of funds. Not a great thing in a country that has to be extremely careful how it spends taxpayers' money. Yeah, they're in really bad shape. I think they're on their 3rd bailout, something like that, from the IMF and World Bank, something crazy, or the EU Central Bank maybe. They have no free money to hand out. It's all debt, just like most welfare programs. So Italy, and Europe quickly coming apart at the seams. Who we got? We got Dad on YouTube joining us. Iceland has a 250 military force, but equal rights in NATO. Iceland's part of NATO? I didn't know Iceland was part of NATO. I know they're not in the EU, but I guess it makes sense they're part of NATO because they were part of the northern line there against the Russian subs and whatnot, and the sub sensors. But interesting. Barry Wood. Albert Pike will tell you who is responsible for past wars and the World War III in the making. Same people who killed the guy making the movie The Gray State, right? Well, the central powers that be. What is that in dollars, Walter? Well, no, the euro is pretty powerful against the dollar, even now, as they say. I guess you're talking about the euro commentary, right? The euro right here, they compare it 9,360 euros, or about 10,000 and some dollars. So the euro is fairly strong relative to the dollar. Of course, the race is to the bottom. The race, whoever can make their country the weakest through inflation is going to win the game. If that makes any sense whatsoever, it doesn't, because it's so counterintuitive. But I've seen the presentations on it about how the central banks are in this race to create weaker currencies against each other to win this through with between interest rates and inflation, of how they get leverage. It's basically leverage. It's not about because the strong currency limits your ability to spread. That's like a disease. It's some pretty baffling stuff when you really get into it, when you think about the terms weakening your currency. But that's the situation we're in. Who else we got here? Harshit Namdev. Okay, welcome to the chat. Thanks for coming in. Welcome. Good morning. Well, right, Wes. And there's people that are in NATO that aren't in the EU, but the bigger concern, I think, is the way that EU stuff is starting to diverge from the mission of NATO. But that's the way I would put it. The mission of NATO is becoming a lot different than that of the EU. They're starting to conflict. And getting out of NATO is the dissolving of also the EU with its Brexit talk and everything else is starting to move on. So that's the next article. Got up here from the Zero Hedge from Mike Shedlock, posted over on the Zero Hedge. Most absurd Brexit claim ever, 30-year recession worse than the 1930s. So, of course, it continues with the fear-mongering about why to not do Brexit. We must not break away from those we have never been joined with. Again, Britain, great, you can imagine like King James and King Henry and Henry VIII and all these people thinking they had to be joined with Europe, not take it over. I mean, sure, like a lot of them had dreams of, conquering certain areas of France and, having control over lands in Europe. But one of those older British kings being like handing over their sovereignty to be joined with Europe, they would have been like, they would have chopped your head off, right? But that's the propaganda that's getting pumped out of the Britain, that they have to stay joined or else, and that's all central bank led propaganda. But here it says the left-wing rag, The Guardian, promotes the most hyped up silliness to date on Brexit, a 30-year recession, which the central bank could probably make happen after Brexit happens. But they want to get enough fear mongering so that they don't try it, because it does affect their bottom line in the end and the control, as we know. But this is a quote out of The Guardian. The writer's Amelia Heal, and she is citing experts in her appraisal that the UK cannot simply trade on WTO terms, the World Trade Organization, after a no-deal Brexit. So this is the no deal, which is like the worst case. What would you call it? Nuclear option, I guess, after a no-deal Brexit. So her quotes out of The Guardian: the UK will be unable to have frictionless, tariff-free trade under WTO rules for up to 7 years in the event of a no-deal Brexit, according to the two leading European Union law specialists. So they're going to the lawyers to get their information. The ensuing chaos would double food prices and plunge Britain into a recession that could last up to 30 years. It's like Britain trades with nobody else but Europe. But I guess a lot of their close ties are there. Things are cheaper the shorter distance they go, right? But a recession that could last up to 30 years. Talk about scaring people. These are claim the lawyers who acted for Gina Miller in the historic case that forced the government to seek Parliament's approval to leave the EU. No deal, means leaving with nothing, she said, except for your sovereignty and your freedom and pretty much all your stuff, which Britain has significant stuff. The anticipated recession will be worse than the 1930s, let alone 2008. It is impossible to say how long it would go on for. Some economists say 10 years. Others say the effects could be felt for 20 or even 30. So that's the fear-mongering coming out of Britain about leaving the EU, that you will be economically destitute for your remaining productive years, at least. If you think about the young, anybody in their 20s is going to be like, what, I'm going to be in a recession for the rest of my, productive life. Anybody older is like, what, I'm not going to be able to retire. Everybody else will be like, I'm going to die in a recession. Just the mental imagery they're putting in people's heads. And it goes on to talk about the effects. Have I put this in the bottom yet? I don't think so. Get this in the description box for everybody. But they point out several quotes from her article here. The title is very misleading. It was probably an excellent one. But a quote from the former Brexit Secretary, David Davis: there is no reason why many of these cannot be achieved within 2 years. Which are the different, I guess, changes. So they're countering her article here with these quotes. Says here, Jacob Rees-Mogg stated, actually, to correct her, we won't know the full economic consequences for a very long time, which is definitely true. You never know the full consequences or the actual effects unless you're in on it, unless you're part of the manipulation and the undermining of the system. So they conclude this article. The idea of a 30-year recession wins the blue ribbon for the dumbest statement ever about Brexit. And they hit it pretty hard. This is right over the target here. They say Hill deserves a blue ribbon herself for producing an absurd article full of clearly overhyped nonsense. Right on. Without even properly referencing the one of her alleged experts. Short term, they conclude with the EU will get hit much harder than the UK. Germany will get hit the hardest. This is probably true. At that point, the EU will be ready for serious trade discussions with the UK, or they will just continue to dismantle. The EU will continue to fall apart until it's no longer there, which is possible. But that's how they close out that article. That was a pretty good evaluation of that article. So that I caught my eye with all these other European articles. Right? At plan A or plan B, they win either way, Wes, right? Iron Witches join us. Alicia Clegg, what's up? Toxic Threads, good morning. Dad on YouTube. Tails I win, tails you lose. Iron Witch says, would you be willing to trade this day and all the days ahead for a chance at freedom? People don't talk like that in Europe anymore, I don't think. It's a sad case over there across the pond. We'll see how things shake out in the long run. Your weather just went downhill there, Wes. You hate wind, right? What else was in the zero hedge? Let's see how the market was 200 down in the pre-market. What's it doing in the real deal? It's now that it's open for about 15 minutes. Tommy Boy's not checking in. Oh, down over 300. So what they would call more. Says 350. Yeah, we talked about the Caterpillar deal. Silver's down just slightly, which is kind of odd to be down at the same time. $336. Deteriorating Chinese economy. They can't make up their mind. Is it lack of a trade deal? Is it China? Is it the tariffs? Is it the actual Chinese economy? What is all the things driving all this down? Other than the bond market, which they always avoid talking about that. That's interesting. Hey, Jay Ufum, good morning. How are you? Dad says Yellow Vests need to have a movie in the park day. They play Braveheart. Can you imagine getting all the Yellow Vests together, Dad, and playing Braveheart? They would probably burn Westminster down while they're at it. But most of them aren't Scottish, so they don't align that with that thought. That's got to figure nationalism plays a part. Still, even Great Britain to this day, Welsh, British, Scottish, English still has a little bit of meaning to certain groups. It's not. They're not like being in a state, because in the United States we have very state centric still. It's not quite that bad, but it's not like being from Texas. But still, if they're Scottish, they'll let you know, or Welsh or whatever. Especially when they still speak their dialects, just like we do over here. Midwest Preppers joined us. What's going on? Out of the market since October, spent most on preps anyway. Right? Right on. Get out of the fake market and Gregor Manarino plays the market, and I watch him to kind of just get his take. But he's clearly said and tells people, it's like our whole purpose here is to soak money out of the market. He's just riding it and making. He's not long term. Nothing like people telling you to invest your life savings in the market. Definitely nothing like that. And getting out, it's like a casino. If you're not willing to take it to the casino, don't go into the stock market. Don't go into any paper market of any sort. Have real stuff. M. Harrison's with us. Good morning. How you doing, sir? Haven't seen you in a minute. Looks like you're doing good. Smiles all around. Iron Witch says protesting one day a week is useless in your opinion. I think it's one of those things, you send a message while you can. It's better than nothing. But protesting also, we have seen, might be the least effective at this point. We might be beyond that, but we'll see. Play Joan of Arc for the French. There you go. There you go, Alicia. Think that'll get the French fired up? Oh, I see what Walter's saying. If you're chucking Molotovs, that you're a more effective protest, even if it's one day a week. Well, there's been a couple instances. They did. There was a fire set on the entrance to the central bank, one of the regional central banks in France during their protest, which I thought was very over the target. If you're going to go to the heart of the problem, there you go. Red October has joined us. Good morning, America. Howdy. No doubt. Funny fact about Texas, says Wes. The longest running play in the state is Oklahoma. There's that whole Oklahoma, Texas thing coming out. Jay Ufum says, I wonder what the elections would be like in France. Would there be a lot of clean out? I don't know how their elections work in France now. I know the prime minister's on his last leg. Macron is, you figure, got to be done next time or next round, right? Maybe. I don't know. Do they do an annual change there when they do prime minister? Is it annual or biannual? Because that's like elected by their parliamentarians and stuff. But anyway, I guess while we're on the economic thing, and we'll go down, this will probably be our last one here. We'll check in on the markets again before we punch out. The hidden automation agenda of the Davos elite, which is duh. This is out of the New York Times, which is kind of funny. Like it's hidden. Like nobody's been seeing all the automation and the pushing for fewer people, because then they're less of a problem. They can build machines, take everybody's place. They're already transhumanist for the most part anyway in the elite, which are trying to meld their bodies with computers and machinery to live forever. So it's not like it's a hidden agenda there, New York Times. They're making it sound like this is some backwoods, back of the paper conspiracy or something, but people have been talking about this for decades. But the Davos meeting going on in Switzerland right now of all the elite says they'll never admit it in public, but many of your bosses want machines to replace you as soon as possible. Talk to any auto worker, I think that they would be like, where have you been the last 30 years? So they've been mingling for the last week with corporate executives, and they notice that their answers to questions about automation depend very much on who is listening. Like they don't want people to know, like they haven't said it openly, and multiple, forward-leaning guidance for their corporations, all their stock reports they have to put out. They have to talk about, automation and moving forward and improving outputs for their corporations. You don't think they talk about those things? The New York Times isn't paying attention, or they're just trying to make it sound like this is some dark conspiracy, maybe to discredit those that have brought it to light in the past. There's a panel of discussions about building human-centered AI. Does that make any sense? Human-centered AI. Human-centered artificial intelligence. That doesn't even make sense. The fourth industrial revolution. In Davos, they speak for the corporate adoption of machine learning and other advanced technology and talk about the need to provide a safety net for people who lose their jobs as a result. So they're going to pay you off so you don't riot and try to take down their system. Or until they can figure out how to build a Terminator. And then once they get that, they're going to laugh at you. And then Terminator's going to turn on them, and then we're all Skynet. We know how that works out. We've all seen the movie. Everybody see RoboCop? Remember how that works out? Talking about priming the pump, I mean, stuff like RoboCop was out. That was the 80s, right? And that's where they're going. They want to be able to either make people into machines or have machines that are completely obedient to them. They're racing to automate their own workforces to stay ahead of the competition with little regard for impact on workers. Yeah, it's all about, and this is all, the only way that any of this is possible, remember, and it's not so much that they can think it, but the only way they can do it is through inflationary fiat money. The being able to leverage through debt and stock options and all these paper schemes is the only way they can get this done. That's the only way that they're able to speed up this process in this way and basically work towards this ultimate goal, because there's so much fake leverage out there in their markets, in the money that they're using. That's what causes all this. Because if there wasn't all the hyperinflation and all these issues around cost, and the inflated cost of labor, because everything else costs more because of the inflationary policies of central banks, all cuts under the bottom line. If that didn't exist, they'd be less likely to push towards AI and automation, because it wouldn't be as necessary. But I repeat myself. Who's this cat? All over the world, executives are spending billions of dollars to transform their business into lean, digitized, highly automated operations. They crave the fat profit margins automation can deliver and see AI as a golden ticket to savings, perhaps by letting them whittle departments with thousands of workers down to just a few dozen, right? Because labor cost is your biggest cost in any business. And the legacy costs that go along with some places that have retirement plans and health plans and all these things that are government mandates ultimately cuts more into your bottom line in the long run too. It says here people are looking to achieve very big numbers. This is the president of Infosys, a technology and consulting firm. Mohit Joshi is this cat's name. um, Continuing the quote, earlier they had incremental 5 to 10% goals in reducing their workforce. Now they're saying, why can't we do it with 1% of the people we have? Few American executives will admit to wanting to get rid of human workers, a taboo in today's age of inequality. Today's age of inequality. Imagine the inequality when AI has more power and automation has more power than humans. So they've come up with a long list of buzzwords and euphemisms that to disguise their intent. Workers aren't being replaced by machines; they're being released from onerous, repetitive tasks. Companies aren't laying off workers; they're undergoing digital transformation. Right? Keywords in any when companies report their quarterly earnings and stuff, they put out these catchphrases that people that are in the investing catch on to, but kind of are glossed over by the press who doesn't report on a lot of it. So a 2017 survey by Deloitte found that 53% of companies had already started to use machines to perform tasks previously done by humans. The figure is expected to climb to 72 by next year. This goes on down. Obviously, they're pushing the agenda on and on. Let's see how they close this out, because this looks like it's a little long in the tooth for this time in the morning. Let's see how they close this out. So automating work is a choice, of course, one made harder by the demands of shareholders, but it is still a choice. And even if some degree of unemployment, well, it's not really a choice because, again, you're being out leveraged by your competition, and inflation is eating away at your bottom line every minute of every day. And even if some degree of unemployment caused by automation is inevitable, these executives can choose how the gains from automation and AI are distributed, and whether to give the excess profits they reap as a result to workers or hoard it for themselves and their shareholders. What else are they going to do with the excess profits? Says the choices made by the Davos elite and the pressure applied on them to act in workers' interest rather than their own will determine whether AI is used as a tool for increasing productivity or for inflicting pain. The pain is a side effect. It's always about increasing productivity with them. It has nothing to do with anything else. Here's the final quote that close it out. The choice isn't between automation and non-automation, says Eric Brynolfsson. Sure, might be how you say it. The director of MIT's initiative on digital economy. It's between whether you use the technology in a way that creates shared prosperity or more concentration of wealth. You can't share prosperity. People have to develop, but it's all about concentration of wealth otherwise, because it's all about what the bad central banking policy is. It's like becoming a self-licking ice cream cone. Self-fulfilling prophecy is what we're heading into without even knowing it. So that's the last article I had pulled up, and it's about that time, folks. What we got going on in the side chat, we'll check in here. Wes says first make robot girlfriends, then ruin robot girlfriend by teaching her talk for herself. Okay. Go get you some. Iron Witch says New York Times wants you to think they got some secret scoop, right? It's a secret ploy to make themselves relevant. Well, they sound trendy and cool to their average reader, and so many people out here on the fringe like us, we don't read the New York Times daily anyway. We pretty much ignore it, so it's only speaking to a select crowd. Wes says robotics have been taking over for 60 years, right? Yeah, talk to an auto worker. Hey, Farkas has joined us. What's up? How you doing this morning? Toxic. If no one works, no one can buy. Well, you'll be mandated to purchase certain things, probably, Alicia. You know. Right, Walter. A lot of people work, but a lot of people don't work but still buy. Yeah, there's a certain tipping point, but again, it's all supported by fiat currency. It's all supported by fake money, and the going into a digital account, these digital proposals for money, is not going to help the situation. That's all pushing all this to off a cliff, um, accelerating the problems while they see it as solving the problems. And this is a reaction to the problem. Automation is a reaction to the problems of inflationary banking. There's always, of course, obviously, automation can have its place in developing industry, sure. But if it was real money, if they had to put real money into it instead of leverage, which is just debt leveraged against debt, if they were doing it, as long as they're doing it that way, they're always going to be able to, they're going to need more because they can't afford the labor they're putting in. It's a cycle. It's just a huge cycle. Dad, you're being given the time you need to seek new opportunities. Oh, we are, all of us. We're being given the time. Everybody should just become a farmer. That might be the only way to let the technocrat transhumanists do what they're going to do, um, and send their armies of robot armies after us, and that's where's the next. We'll be on to the Terminator Skynet soon enough. Midwest Prepper, good morning. How are you? Says every time we automate a job, we have to hire 3 engineers to keep it running. Is that right? Payroll is even, but output is five times. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, right. Because engineers are expensive. I take it, and that depends on the automation. And a lot of people contract out the maintenance of their automation devices, and that contracting company works for multiple conglomerates and corporations. So there's a little bit of leverage built in there. Your your company's not going to be able to afford all the maintenance themselves, the upkeep. It's like leasing your vehicle fleet, you know. We all do our part, right, Wes? Walter has guys show up on every big job asking for work, but only cash because they get paid to stay home, right, Walter? Yeah. Um, I'm sure the people that were laid off, the government workers for the past month, would have liked to find some cash work on the side, right? But the trend towards the electronic side that you can't hide from the economic system is going to prevent a lot of that. Dad on YouTube says that's what I thought I was going to do: automation and PLC controls. Life had other plans. Each automation replaces hundreds of workers, then only 5 people. Reboot? Kerboot? What is a kerboot? I think that's a misspelling. All right. Hey, Bobby, what's going on? Bobby Solar Homestead has joined us. Good morning, Bobby. How's things? We're just talking about automation taking over the world, how we're going to be fighting the robots soon enough on the plains. So hunker down, stock up your food. We're going to need it in the fight against the automatrons. It's like almost like you can see the future. It's almost like they make these movies just to let us know what's coming, because it does seem like it's coming more likely than not. Market's still down. Tommy Boy might go buy some silver. I don't know. Oil getting crushed today. So that gas price should stay tame and down this week for all of us. Universal income. Hey, Angel, you missed out, Angel. Yeah, universal income. Are you rewound, Angel, or where are you at? Because we were talking about universal income in Italy a while back. We're on to automation and the global elite leveraging their fake money to automate their industries so they don't have to worry about paying people. But we repeat ourselves. So thanks for checking in, folks. Have a good Monday. Kicking into this week. My schedule is going to be such, it's going to be sporadic. I'm not going to plan on a Wednesday or Friday. Probably won't do any morning live streams the rest of this week. Just so you know, don't be looking for it. We might catch you on some other videos or something, maybe on lunchtime or something like that. But it'll be hit and miss. We'll see what happens. But the schedule is such that I know that those Monday mornings aren't going to be happening. So just to let you know now, we might see you on a Monday, Saturday morning, or next Monday, one or the other. But we'll see most of y'all around on the YouTubes. Catch Wes's stream or somebody's videos to throw out there. Alicia, probably do a video or two this week. So we'll catch up with you around there. But thanks for joining. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for the comments. And y'all have a good day, good week. We'll see you later. Live free.